Oh, cool. Oh, I see what's going on. And yeah, and then you'll just let me know when to go ahead and share my screen after the introduction and all that stuff. Cool. Perfect. Oops. I think I'm doing one on wisdom. That's all right. No big deal. Actually, maybe I should share my screen.
Yeah, as soon as I finish the introduction, then I'll give you the cue to share your screen.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, welcome everybody to our Rush Generations lecture. I'm Jasmine Chandy, the program coordinator for Rush Generations lectures. For those of you who may be new to Rush Generations is a health and wellness program. So we offer a number of programs that are all geared towards aging as best as we can. So we have lectures like this one, as well as workshops, support groups, classes, and we'll share a little bit more of some of our upcoming programs soon too. And so we're glad you're here. Thank you for finding your way here, whether you joined in over the phone or if you're joining in online. Our lecture today is on spirituality and wellness, and more specifically on what exactly is wisdom. And so we're going to start off by introducing our speaker for today. And before that, if you have any questions throughout the lecture or any comments, you can type it in the chat box on YouTube. And so if you're joining in on your computer, you'll see that chat box on the right side of your screen. If you're joining in on a tablet or on a smartphone, you'll see the chat box at the bottom of the screen. And for those of you who are over the phone, if you have a question, we will have time at the end of the lecture where you can unmute yourself and ask your question too. So if you have any questions or comments throughout the lecture, please do leave them in the chat box. And so without further ado, we're going to introduce our speaker. So Stan is a senior lecturer emeritus in the University of Chicago School of Social Service Administration. He has over 40 years of experience as a clinician, educator, and consultant. He served in the U.S. Army from 1969 to 1974 as a Vietnamese linguist and a legal clerk. He has written about psychiatric rehabilitation, behavioral pharmacology, behavioral medicine, aging, motivational interviewing, and staff training. His current practice interests include mental health, drug and medical problems, aging, veterans issues, and addressing cross-cultural and spiritual issues in direct practice. He regularly consults with Asian Human Services, Rush University Health and Aging, Lake County Veterans and Families Service Foundation, and the Professional Advisory Group for Advocate Condell Hospital Clinical Pastoral Education. I've also had the opportunity to just learn from Stan, and he is just incredible. Every time I hear from him, I learn something new. So I'm really grateful he's speaking with us today. And we're going to go ahead and get started.
Well, thank you very much, Jasmine. I appreciate it, and I would tell you the same thing as I tell everybody, is that I always learn more from my students than they learn from me. So thank you for that. Now, today I'm going to be talking about what is wisdom, and okay, let me see if I can do this here. Oh, good. Breaking news. Keith Richards has just tested positive for everything except COVID-19. And for those of you, and this is one of the things I love presenting for this group, because I don't have to explain who Keith Richards is the way I do for my students at the university. And you would probably recognize the truth in this statement that Keith Richards actually looks better now than he did like 50 years ago. And I do hope that he wills his liver to medical science, because if there was ever a resilient liver, that man has it. So just a passing word. First of all, I want you to think a little bit about what is wisdom. And I have a slide here now. People sometimes ask me if I'm a member of an organized religion, and I usually tell people no, I'm actually a Unitarian, so not really an organized religion. But one of the pictures up here is Ralph Waldo Emerson, which is about as close to a saint as Unitarians have. And then in the middle is Maya Angelou. And down at the bottom is a picture of my one of my students who is married to a Tibetan who was studying to be a monk. Their little boy, they taught him to sit, and you notice he's in the lotus position meditating. And at that time, I think he was about 2.5 or 3. But where he used to like to go meditate was sit in with the dog with the dog's pin that they had a cushion on. So we have the little Buddha and the dog there. So what is wisdom? The question is that I would pose to you is, what do you mean when you say a person is wise? What does, and if you want to put some of your ideas in the chat, that would be great. But just think about when you say someone's wise, what do you mean? And I would tell you, when I grew up in a small town in Eastern Oregon on a farm. So I grew up in a rural part of the world, and went to church, every Sunday, and actually many times, several times a week, in an evangelical church. And I remember my dad telling me one time, he pointed out one of the older woman, actually she's probably younger than I am now, but at that time it seemed like she was very old, and he said, she's very wise. And so I remember as a child, I used to look at her and see if I could catch her doing something wise. And that's something that's always kind of intrigued me. And he actually at different times had mentioned different people in the church as being very wise. I thought it was interesting that, number one, all of the people he pointed out were women, and all the people he pointed out were old. So that was one of the things that I kind of made that association. Here we have a picture of 2 monks sitting on a mountaintop, and one of them asks, what is the meaning of life? And the other one, well, have you tried Googling it? So just a thought. So for what is wisdom? And we have a picture of 2 wise men, the Dalai Lama and Bishop Desmond Tutu down here, who I would generally regard as being very wise people. First of all, there's no universally accepted definition of wisdom. There have been different Greek scholars, Aristotle and Plato, and they've all talked about wisdom, but right now we don't have any universally accepted definition. Webster's dictionary definition: characteristics attributed to a wise person, the ability to discern inner qualities in relationships, which I always thought was interesting, to discern, kind of the idea of discern what's going on below the surface. The second meaning, accumulated philosophical or scientific learning. And then the teachings of ancient wise people. Folk beliefs, in other words, the general public, us, characterize wisdom as an essence, a set of immutable characteristics developing as a consequence of innate potential and extraordinary life experiences. The emphasis is on the process rather than the outcome of decision making. And let me point out a couple of things there. One of them is notice that this characterization of wisdom, that these are characteristics of a person as opposed to maybe a behavior. And the emphasis being on the process. How do people go about making decisions about life and other things? And they also say, we often have the conversation in different areas about, is it nature or nurture? What we often hear from the public is it's a combination of innate potential and interacting with extraordinary life experiences. Implicit theories are representations of what lay people view wisdom to be. Explicit theories are those constructed and tested by experts who study wisdom, that is, people like psychologists and sociologists. Implicit theories can be used to test explicit theory. So a theory of wisdom that doesn't match with lay views, with popular views, would be hard to defend. So if someone came up with a definition of wisdom that just didn't match with the way that people like us think about it, that would be a hard definition to defend. So some of the characteristics or some of the things that go into wisdom, first of all, kind of deals with universal truths, not the appearance of fleeting phenomena. So it's, again, that early one, what goes on beneath the surface, so that the truths are there that would be truths that would last across time as opposed to something that would be in the moment. Second, it isn't specialized, but attempts to understand how various aspects of reality are related. Now, this is one that people sometimes challenge. Are there people that have specialized wisdom in a certain area, but not into others? And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So the idea, though, is that according to this understanding, is that we attempt to understand how things go together, how different things that we experience in different areas, how they merge and how they come together. Studies of wisdom, and yes, dear friends, there are people who study wisdom. In fact, the University of Chicago has a Center for Practical Wisdom, and I sent links to that are on some material that I think that Jasmine will be able to send out to people. And you can get on their mailing list. They have a monthly newsletter from the Center for Practical Wisdom that links to different articles and chapters and sometimes book reviews and things like that. But studies of wisdom identify several clusters of characteristics, components of wise thinking. So one, intellectual humility, recognition of uncertainty and the universality of change, considers different perspectives and integrate these perspectives, cognitive, affective, in other words, compassion, reflective domains, self-transcendence, and humor, sense of humor, cognitive ability, insight, attitude of self-reflection, concern for others, real-world skills, and spirituality. And I would tell you that humor and spirituality are two characteristics that have not always been identified as components of wisdom, but there's some that have come up repeatedly in studies of wisdom in more recent years. Dilip Jesti. Dilip Jesti is a psychiatrist from San Diego, and he started his career working primarily with people with schizophrenia. And he's also an expert in aging, got interested in aging. And then he's now doing a lot of research looking at wisdom in the context of wisdom and how people think about it. Anyway, Dr. Jesti and his colleagues asked 21 men and women, ages 58 to 97, who were receiving hospice care for a terminal illness. And he asked them, how did they define wisdom? And interestingly, all of the recognized major themes of wisdom were contained in the descriptions. So some of the things that they came up with: pro-social attitudes, knowledge of life, being active, emotional regulation, positivity and gratitude, openness to new experience, acknowledgement of uncertainty, spirituality, religiosity. And religiosity, I should probably explain that term. Religiosity refers to, it's how we measure religious behavior. Answer to questions about how many times do you go to church? More than once a week, 2 or 3 times a month, rarely, only during holidays, etc. And by the way, it might interest you and probably not surprise you to know that Americans tend to lie about that. There's an article, I was trying to remember, Talking Jesus and Walking Santa Claus is the name of it, or something like that. And they looked at asked questions like I had said there, how many times do you go to church? And people were responded, and this is in the specific to the US, by the way. This didn't happen in Western Europe or Canada. And if they ask it that way, everybody was going to church. Oh, good. But then if they said, so what did you do last Sunday? Then they started getting answers like, well, I was going fishing. Sunday's a beautiful day, so I went golfing. And if I have time, I have a joke about a priest who went golfing on Easter. That's for later. So if they ask it that way, then it turns out that a lot of the people that we're talking about going to church every week, turns out that a bunch of them were actually, going to the church of fly fishing fairly often. So self-reflection came up, sense of humor, and tolerance. Similarly, all participants cited decision-making and knowledge of life as essential to wisdom. Now, wise people are not always silent, but they know when to be. I was like that one. So, how about us? How would you rate yourself? And I'm going to read you some items from a scale called, it's a SD Wise, and I gave the link for it, and so that people can actually go online and take the test and self score, and then get some feedback for people who like to do self tests and things like that. But each item is rated strongly disagree, neutral, agree, and strongly agree. And here are the items. And again, how would you rate yourself? First item, I'm good at perceiving how others are feeling. Second, others look to me to help them make choices. Others say I give good advice. I often don't know what to tell people when they come to me for advice. I have trouble making decisions. I usually make decisions in a timely fashion. I tend to postpone making major decisions as long as I can. And you notice how some of the items are worded positively, some are worded negatively. I would rather someone else make the decision for me if I'm uncertain. Now, one of the things I often wondered about this item, does this count? Does having your grandchild help you set up your computer or your iPhone, does that count on that one? Because I think it doesn't, but just as you're rating yourself. I have trouble thinking clearly when I'm upset. I remain calm under pressure. I'm able to recover well from emotional stress. I cannot filter my negative emotions. I take time to reflect on my thoughts. I avoid self-reflection. It is important that I understand the reasons for my actions. I don't analyze my own behavior. I have a difficult time keeping friendships. I avoid situations where I know my help will be needed. I would stop a stranger who dropped a $20 bill to return it. I treat others the way I would like to be treated. I enjoy learning things about other cultures. I'm okay with others having morals and values other than my own. I generally learn something from every person I meet. And finally, I enjoy being exposed to diverse viewpoints. Now, these are items, and if I remember correctly, there are 24 items that is on this self-rating for wisdom. And of course, you probably notice that if you had a close friend or a spouse or partner rate you, how would they rate you on that? There are studies that look at it that way too. There are also studies where they've asked people to nominate wise people in their community or among their acquaintances. But this particular instrument is a self-rated instrument. And again, if you want to do that online, you can take it online, and then it will give you a score. And here we have two young folks. You know, in difficult moments like this, I often turn to a force greater than myself. Religion? Star Trek. Okay. So we've talked about wisdom. Let's talk a little bit about non-wisdom. And there are several different kinds. One, quasi-wisdom. This is near wisdom, incomplete reflection, or insight. Quasi-wisdom. Veneer of wisdom, a false appearance of wisdom, often because of a position of power or authority. So appearance of wisdom that often occurs because a person is a person of power or is in authority. That's a veneer of wisdom. Pseudo-wisdom, false appearance of wisdom motivated by self-interest. Dark pseudo-wisdom, false appearance of wisdom motivated by evil intentions. In other words, false appearance of wisdom motivated by need to take advantage of someone, for example. So what do you think? Would you identify these same dimensions in non-wisdom? The opposite of wisdom, though, is not non-wisdom, but foolishness. So let's look at some of the characteristics of foolishness. Foolishness exhibited through 6 cognitive fallacies. First, unrealistic optimism. People who think they are so smart and effective that they can do whatever they want. Egocentrism. When people start to think that they are the only ones who matter. I would probably refer to that as narcissism. Omniscience. People who think they know everything and lose sight of the limitations of their own knowledge. You probably heard it said about some people, you can always tell so-and-so, but you can't tell them much. Okay, that's omniscience. Omnipotence. People think they're all powerful and can do whatever they want. Invulnerability. People think they can get away with anything, that they're too clever to get caught, or it won't matter if they do. And finally, ethical disengagement. People think ethics are important, but only for other people. In other words, people who believe that they are above ethical concerns. And I will refrain from making further comments on foolishness. A wise man once said, I don't know, ask a woman. So, who is wise? Who's someone you consider wise? Do you have a model for wisdom? And if so, who is your model for wisdom? Is there someone that you knew, someone that you know, someone that you've heard about? What were they like? If it's someone you knew personally, how did you feel in their presence? What did you take away from your encounter with this person? What did they do that led you to name them as wise? How was this wisdom that they had communicated? And finally, were they wise in all situations? And by the way, one of the things I should probably, in interest of full disclosure, I mentioned that I'm a Unitarian, and I'm involved, or at least before COVID, was involved with the military ministry at Great Lakes Naval Training Center. So there were several of us, my wife and several others, who we went out once a week on Sunday and were lay leaders for a service, a church service out at Great Lakes. The presentation that I'm doing for you now, I did for them and have done for them several times. The conversations that I get that come about, that I get involved with these boots, these Navy recruits, is fascinating around this particular topic. around who they think is wise. Are people wise in all situations? This is Solomon's paradox. Biblical King Solomon was portrayed as a paragon of wisdom. People traveled from far away to seek his counsel, and yet he maintained over 800 wives and concubines. And I'm going to show my wisdom by refraining from commenting on anybody who has 800 wives and concubines. His passions distracted him from educating his son, who grew up to be an ineffective tyrant. He also bragged of his wealth. So clearly, we've got someone who is wise in one area of life, and yet, can we say that he was wise as applied to his own personal life, his passions, and what kind of a parent he was in terms of raising his son? So sometimes is an example of general wisdom versus personal wisdom. One of the things is, and let me go back one about this, in the research on wisdom is where they've actually had given people vignettes where they would make decisions and go through the decision-making process. What they generally find is that people can show better wisdom in making decisions about or helping other people with their decisions than about making their personal decisions. In fact, there's recently a paper written, and if anybody wants it, if you contact Jasmine, I can send it to you, about the value of talking to yourself in third person. So, Stan, you should really do this. And it may be that one of the things that's going on here is this idea that if you talk to yourself in the third person, it engages that level of wisdom that we can apply to another person. So wisdom is highly variable across situations, seems to be context, situation, and culture dependent. And as I mentioned before, it's easier to be wise with others than with our own selves. Wisdom traditions tend to take a more analytical approach. Eastern traditions focus on both Western traditions, I don't think I said that. Western traditions tend to take a more analytical approach. Eastern traditions focus on both analytical and synthetic approaches. So Western traditions, based on, for example, the Greek philosophers and Western European philosophers, tend to be more analytical, but Eastern traditions based on Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, they tend to focus both on analytical and synthetic approaches. And one of the things that Dr. Jesty has done, and Dr. Jesty is, by the way, from India, grew up in India. He compared Western wisdom, I can't remember what book it was, with wisdom in the Bhagavad Gita. And so I'm guessing some of this came from him. Analytical approach relies on knowledge and information processing capabilities, prioritizing cognitive abilities and goal attainment. The synthetic approach highlights human experience and ways that one can integrate past and present and view a situation as both a whole as well as its constituent parts, which I thought was very interesting. And one of the things I'm curious about is if you look only at 21st century writings, whether that same distinction would be true. And I don't have an answer for that. So, can wisdom be taught? What kinds of experiences lead to wisdom? Does it automatically come with growing older? Okay. So, first of all, can wisdom be taught? To date, as far as I know, no proposed programs for training wisdom have been validated empirically. Here's what's been tried. Most of the research is on teaching virtuous behavior, arguably linked to the ability to make wise decisions. So most of the research teaching wisdom has been research on components of wisdom that they think are important. So virtuous behavior is one of them. Ethical decision making is another one. Another thing that's been tried is working through ethical decision making vignettes. And the way that they propose it, the way that they do this, is that they will provide a vignette, and here's a decision. What are you going to do? What would you advise? And a lot of the times it is if you were in that situation or if you were advising somebody else. Third, teaching inferential reasoning about everyday decisions. So instead of working through vignettes and teaching virtuous behavior, it's teaching reasoning based on everyday decisions that we all make. And then finally, studying exemplars of wisdom, morals, and values. So studying the writings of wise people. Will Rogers is one that I end up quoting a lot. Good judgment comes from experience, and a lot of that comes from bad judgment. Yep. So overall, teaching wise thinking through exemplars can be guided through a combination of educational tasks concerning socio-historical contexts. So having a teaching through an exemplar, if it's taken out of context, is different than if you put it in the social and the historical context. What was going on at the time? The exemplars' life narratives and by affective reflection on their lives. So given that person's life, given their context, let's look at the decisions that they made. The defining feature of wisdom fostering situations is the degree to which it challenges one's basic beliefs about life. In other words, the degree to which it challenges your life narrative or what you believe is going on. You often don't learn as much from exemplars that don't challenge the way that you think the world works, because when the way that your worldview is challenged, then that tends to stick in your head better. Are there experiences that lead to wisdom? Post-traumatic growth is the experience of positive change that occurs as the result of the struggle with highly challenging life crises. Now, post-traumatic growth, we've often, and I'm sure you've all heard about post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic stress disorder and trauma. Post-traumatic growth is a result of that struggle, of people kind of making sense out of what has happened, out of this horrific event that's occurred. And by the way, post-traumatic growth doesn't necessarily mean that suffering and pain is no longer there. It just means that your worldview is expanded and changed. It's manifested, post-traumatic growth, manifested by an increased appreciation for life, more meaningful personal relationships, increased sense of personal strength, changed priorities, and richer existential and personal life. So that when there's a traumatic event, the way that you view what's important to you shifts very often, and the way that you think about what's important changes. Growth is a process, though, and not an event. It's ongoing. So post-traumatic growth isn't something that has an on and off switch. Okay? It occurs and evolves over time. Question is, might growth in wisdom accompany trauma and post-traumatic growth? And one of the groups that Dr. Justy has evaluated are military veterans, combat veterans, and looking at the degree to which their experience, combat experience, and the things that happened in war influenced their own growth and influenced their wisdom. Wisdom is knowledge, and this is from one of my students. And one of the courses that I teach at the School of Social Work at the University of Chicago is spirituality and social work practice. And one of my students in that course said, wisdom is knowledge gained from experience, applied skillfully to the way one lives. That is, I think, probably as good a definition of what sometimes is referred to as practical wisdom that I've heard. Knowledge gained from experience, applied skillfully to the way one lives. Now, and I have a cartoon here. One of the wise men steps on a rake and whacks himself in the head, and Joseph said, wise man, huh? So, have you had experiences of your own that led you to grow in wisdom? What were these experiences, and what did you learn from the experience? Were the experiences or lessons difficult and hard, or were they smooth and easy? Okay, so wisdom and aging. The great thing about aging is that you don't lose all the other ages you've ever been. Okay, so I'm in my mid-70s, but I haven't lost 30, 40, 50, 60. Lots of old people don't get wise, but you don't get wise unless you age. Now, I'm not entirely sure that young people can't be wise, but lots of old people don't get wise, but you don't get wise unless you age. And I guess with the idea is that to the degree that life experience leads to wisdom, the older you are, the more life experience you have just based on mathematics. We require the opportunity to learn and practice the behaviors of wisdom. There's abundant evidence that the presence of older people and access to their wisdom broadly improves lives and human life. And in fact, I don't know whether anybody's talked with you about that or you've heard anybody, and if you have, I'm sure they're going to speak more eloquently and sensibly about it than I do. But one of the things that has been very interesting and for people to study who study human evolution and evolution of species is that most organisms, in general, organisms tend to die fairly soon after they end their the age at which they can reproduce. But there are some animals, including humans, that extend life beyond that. And so they've found in primates, baboons, chimpanzees, monkeys, and they found it also in dolphins and whales, that the pod, the community, that there's more reproduction, more successful reproduction, and more successful thriving among the younger animals if they're presence of what they sometimes call the grandparents around. So that one of the things about humans, and they found in studying different indigenous groups, is that the more that there are old people around, the better the young people thrive and the more offspring that women tend to have. So there's abundant evidence that the presence of older people and access to their wisdom broadly improves lives and broadly improves human life. Finally, Waldo finds himself. Yes. Beautiful young people are accidents of nature, but beautiful old people are works of art. And that is from Eleanor Roosevelt. And here are the references. Several books on wisdom. Igor Grossman. There are several of these people that come up quite a bit. Grossman, Jesty, Sternberg, Staudinger. These are some people that do a lot of writing and studying on wisdom. And if anybody's interested in a reference list or in some and links in these things, let me know. I do have a link here for the Center for Practical Wisdom at the University of Chicago. And I think that's it. This is a picture of cranes and swans. And by the way, I'm very fond of cranes. I don't know if I'm so heading off into the ozone now, but I don't know, have any of you heard cranes flying over very high, like when they're migrating? You know, if you hear geese migrating, flying over, you can locate where they're coming from. But when cranes are flying, when they're high above you, it sounds like the entire universe is making that sound. It's like it comes from everywhere all at the same time. And, you know, I listen for that during the fall migration and the spring migration. It's actually more like winter because it usually happens around Thanksgiving or in December for the winter one. But I'm always listening for them. And I swear I never am able to quickly locate where the flock is, where the cranes are coming from. But cranes, I can see why they're special, because there's a kind of an ethereal sense about that sound when they're migrating. It's just gorgeous. Okay, I think I have done enough damage for one day. Let me go ahead and stop the share and see if there's some comments on.
Yes. That was great. We really appreciate you. I
Thank
definitely
you.
learned a lot. We have a few questions already.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. And
Now, and by the way, I'm going to feel free to say, heck, I don't know. So
yes, of course. And so before I read the questions that are online, for those of you who are online, please do continue to add questions into that chat box. Any questions, comments, even if you have a reflection from this lecture, please do add that there, and we can share that with Stan. And before I read the few we have already, I'd like to invite those of you who have joined in over the phone, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask a question, you can do that now.
Oh, cool.
And if you want to unmute yourself, just click *6 on your phone.
And this, by the way, my theory is that this is why you want to have grandchildren. Okay, I should tell you now, I was going to run for president during the last election, and I said, no, I don't want to. But next, in 2024, I'm running for president. I have one plank on my platform. Every person, when they turn 60 years old, is assigned a 6-year-old child to help them with digital devices and the internet. And when that child, the first time you ask for assistance and the child gives you the positive eye roll sign, then you are allowed to trade them for a new 6-year-old. And actually, I'm relatively certain that I could capture probably 80–90% of the over 50 crowd. No, hands down. I totally believe that. So,
very well thought out. Oh, okay. There's a few people who have unmuted yourself. So could one person just maybe say your name, and then we'll start there? If you could just share your name.
My name is Lois Lee Wittenberg.
Perfect. Go ahead, Lois.
And my name is Charlene Porter.
okay.
All
One
right.
of you
So we
have
have.
a question or comment or suggestion?
Yeah. How about we start with Lois, and then after that we can go to Charlene.
Perfect.
Thank you. Yes, I've really enjoyed this presentation, and I'm 80 years old, and I have experienced the best years of my life in the last 40 years because I started reading the Bible, and I was amazed. I thought I was pretty smart, pretty wise, but I realized from experience I was really in the pits and I needed help. And it was just that amazing blessing that I started reading the Bible, and I personally met the wisest man who set his example, walking perfectly on the earth. And as a Jewish woman, I believe Jesus is the Messiah, and he's blessed me, and I hear from him, I talk with him, and that's just my own personal view. And I tell you, I am thriving, even sequestered with COVID, but I'm very, 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 very thankful. And I appreciate everyone's religion, but I do believe the personal relationship with God himself through Jesus. And it sounds very quirky to some people, but I have really lived with the real God man. And I tell you, that's the tops. And I will listen so well to what everyone else has to say. But thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, like they say, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, right?
Yes, exactly. And it's the awesome fear. It's just the realize I'm not scared and shuddering, but I'm jaw-dropped amazed. That is an awesome fear. And thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for sharing that, Lois. Thank you. Charlene, did you want to go next? Did you have a question or a comment?
I was just wanted to say that I enjoyed the presentation. And thank you, because I do a lot of meditating myself, and that has helped me to come through a lot of this isolation, and it helped me to stay focused and balanced. Thank you.
Yes.
That meditation comes up a lot in discussions of developing mindfulness, and meditation and self-reflection often go together.
Yes.
Thank you.
I agree. Thank you, Charlene. That was lovely. Yep, I agree.
Thank you for sharing. And it looks like there's one more person who may not have spoken yet. Did you want to share your name and if you have a question or a comment?
Hi, my name is Constance Lay. I'm sorry that I was late getting on. I just came on. I looked like I missed the presentation, and but so what I hear so far, I'm really feel blessed. And as far as wisdom is concerned, I had a thing I did started years ago. I read a proverb a day, because I always say a proverb a day keeps the devil away. So and it's so full of wisdom, Proverbs. And so that's where I kind of really seek wisdom, part of where I seek it from. But, yeah, and it keeps me well. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing. We're glad you were able to join in.
And it is recorded so people can come back and view it later if they wanted. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for saying that. Yes, exactly. And so right now I'm going to read the questions that are online. And then we'll have one more opportunity for those of you over the phone. If you had a question or a comment, you can ask them. All right. So first question, could you expand on the connection between humor and wisdom?
That one is an interesting one. And I think that, okay, this is my own speculation. So there's, I may be able to, if you want, I can find somebody smart that said something about it. But the way that I think about it is that humor, the way that it works with wisdom is that humor helps you to step back a little bit and to step back and look at things from a bit of a distance. And that the process of making a humorous or thinking about this with a sense of humor allows you not to get so caught up in something that you can't see the forest for the trees. And I think that sometimes humor helps us to expand a little bit. Beyond that, I have no idea. And the thing that's interesting, I haven't seen anybody speculate as to what that's about, as to why there is that connection. It's interesting that it comes up.
Oh, that is interesting. Okay, next one. Is it possible to have wisdom while preferring little social interaction / few friendships?
I don't know. A lot of, I would have to say yes, because there are long wisdom traditions. Think of the Desert Fathers, for example, or the monks that are meditating, the Taoist and Buddhist and Hindu monks that withdraw. In fact, if you look at the stages of life in some cultures, there's a stage of life where we talk about the forest dwellers. These are people, and this comes up particularly in Hindu writings, where you're a student, and then you're a householder, a homeowner, and then there's a time at the end of life when you withdraw. And I would have to say that the faith traditions of the world would argue that you can have wisdom and be withdrawn and be separate and separate yourself from society. The one thing, though, is that if you do that, there's not much opportunity to share it. So even I was trying to remember the Steelite, and shoot, the Steelites. These were monks or holy people who would meditate on a column. But one of the things about the people would come from a long ways around to ask them questions. So even as isolated as they were, they would have people send food up the column, and they would. There was one who, and I can't remember the person's name, the saint's name, who sat there, and I believe it was like for 40 years. But people came and asked questions. So I would say that wisdom can certainly be developed in isolation and by one's own self, and certainly there are traditions that do that. Can it be shared, though? And I think that there's some real value to being able to share that wisdom. So that's just my thought. I'd be interested. Actually, that's a conversation that I would love to have if circumstances allowed. I'd be curious as to whether the person who submitted that comment, what they thought about that.
Yeah.
I would prefer to spend more time listening.
On that one. All right. And then the last one we had from online is, okay, so it's quoting something that you said in the lecture, that it is easier to be wise with others than to oneself. What does it mean to not be wise to yourself?
I almost, my knee-jerk response was normal. I think that, again, if you think of wisdom as the process of making a decision, I think sometimes if you're talking about somebody else, it's easier to be explicit and intentional about context and history and seeing all of the parts than it is to do when you're doing it for yourself, because we get caught up in it, and sometimes it's hard to see ourselves in context. It's hard to pull back from that, and that, I think, is what's going on. It's interesting the degree to which different researchers who have looked at that have come up with that same thing. That's one of those things. It's almost uniform, that everybody says that people are able to make decisions, and even doing the process of talking to yourself in third party, as third person, I mean, can even facilitate that process of making good decisions about yourself, which I thought was very interesting. Yeah. I'm very, by the way, probably people will notice I'm very good at talking around things. So if I'm talking around it too much, I would certainly welcome people saying, "Oh, wait a minute, you managed to dodge that." So.
And I'm like, wow. All right. And so that was the last one we had online. So I just want to open it up again for those of you who have joined in over the phone. If you had any questions or comments that you wanted to ask, here's your last opportunity to do so. You can just click *6 on your phone to unmute yourself. All right, so that looks like it was all of our questions. Stan, we're so glad that you joined us today. Thank you so much.
So should we say BYE now? You want to tell them what
Almost.
that's about?
Yeah, whenever I say BYE, my dog will start barking. So I'm carefully trying to avoid that word. And so before we wrap up, I'm going to go ahead and share some of our upcoming programs. And so I'll go ahead and share that screen. All righty, here we go. Okay, so first for those of you who want to get more information about the COVID-19 vaccine, or to make an appointment to get the vaccine, we encourage you to visit our website. That's rush.edu. On there, we have up-to-date information about the vaccine, as well as a section where you can call a number or sign up online for an appointment when it's available. So for more information about the vaccine, do check out the website. Next, we have our Take Charge of Your Health workshop. And so this one will be in Spanish. And so this is a workshop, a 6-week workshop that's all about managing your chronic conditions. And so you'll learn a ton of great skills about how to set a goal, how to set a SMART goal and how to achieve it, and learn all different aspects about how to improve your health. And so this will take place on Saturdays from March 6th until April 17th, from 10 a.m. until 12:30. So if you'd like to register for this workshop, and it's completely free, you can call the Rush Generations toll-free number at 800-757-0202. Again, that's for the Take Charge of Your Health workshop in Spanish. Next, we have our COVID support group. So this is called Coping and Connection in the Time of COVID. So this is a support group that's taking place every month on the 3rd Wednesday of every month from 3 to 4 p.m. And so this is a support group that we have led by one of our social workers to really talk about how it's been going during this time of COVID and how another opportunity to connect with other people as well. So if you're interested in joining the support group, you can also call our toll-free number. For those of you who have joined in online, we also have the phone number and access code here as well. But for any of our programs, if you call our toll-free number, we can provide you with the information then and also register. All right, and next we have our diabetes education and support group. This is a 3rd Thursday of every month. So again, a once a month support group from 2 to 3 p.m. And so if you're interested in joining this support group, again, for diabetes support and education, you can call our toll-free number at 800-757-0202. Next, we have our Senior Connections Friendly Caller program. And so if you'd be interested in having a trained volunteer call you every week for a chat, this is a really great opportunity to do that. So if you'd like to receive just a friendly call every week, you can register by calling our toll-free number at 800-757-0202. We also have our Rush Caregiver Initiative. So if you're a caregiver or if you have a caregiver, this is a really great opportunity for support for both the caregiver as well as the person who is being cared for. And so this is a really great opportunity. It's a really customized approach. So you would have an assessment and then they'll identify what exactly is needed and be able to offer support in that way. So if you're a caregiver or if you have a caregiver, we encourage you to call the Caregiver Initiative if you'd like support. And the number for that is 312-563-0350. Next, and very appropriate with our conversation today, but we have our Mindfulness 101 class coming up in about a week, actually. And so this is an opportunity to learn different mindfulness techniques and also to manage your stress and also cope with chronic conditions. So it's a really great program. It's also a very popular program. So we encourage you, if you're interested in this, to sign up. This will be on Tuesdays from March 2nd till March 23rd from 1:30 to 3 p.m. And this will be taking place through Zoom. If you're interested and you're not sure how to use Zoom, that's okay. We can help you get to know how to use Zoom and get more comfortable with the platform. The Mindfulness 101 class is $20, but if that's something that you can't afford, we can also work with you on that. So if you're interested, definitely call the toll-free number. Again, that's 800-757-0202. Okay, and then the last program I'd like to share is Shaman Senior Voices. So this is a program through the Center for Excellence in Aging, and it's all geared towards learning what matters most to you as you age. And so we want to expand this conversation about the aging experience. And the way that we do this is through video. So by being able to record a video in 60 seconds to 90 seconds, so a minute or a minute and a half, and telling us what matters most to you as you age. And what we do with those videos is we educate our healthcare students. So these are not only medical students, but also students in administration, physical therapy, speech language pathology, all these healthcare students who are our future healthcare professionals, to be able to learn from you about what's important as you age so that they can be better professionals, and to also have conversations in the community about aging. So if you'd like to record a video and share your perspective with us, you can visit bit.ly/recordmystory. And we encourage you to do that as well. If you have any questions, you can also visit that website. There's more instructions there. And if you didn't want to record a video, you can still explore the website. There's some videos there that we've collected already from different communities. And we also have some other professional videos on there. So a really great thing to do at this time when we're all at home. And lastly, I just want to give one final glimpse of what our number is. It's 800-757-0202. So if you are interested in any of these programs, wanted to get connected, or if you're curious about a program, definitely give us a call and we can get you connected and we can get you registered. But thank you so much all once again for joining our lecture today. We look forward to seeing you soon. And thank you again to Stan. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining. Thank you for spending time with us. So goodbye.